Hello, and welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast. Here, it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you are thriving, when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Fields, Mindfulness Mama Mentor. I coach overstressed moms on how to cultivate self-awareness in their daily lives to take family and life to a new level of awakening. I've been practicing yoga and mindfulness for over 20 years, and I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting course. And I'm the mom of 2 girls, ages 6 and 9. So thank you so much for being here, my friend. I'm really excited for this episode you're about to listen to. This is an episode about bringing play and open-ended play into your kid's life. I'm going to talk to Avital Schrieber. Avital is going to be giving a bonus for the Mindful Parenting course. And the Mindful Parenting course is opening for enrollment soon. It's at mindfulparentingcourse.com, and there are other great events happening at hunteryoga.com/events. So I want you to go over and check out the events page because there are retreats happening. I'll be doing a Mindful Mother's Day retreat here in the Philadelphia area, Northern Delaware area on the Saturday before Mother's Day. So that's May 13th. So that's at hunteryoga.com/events. And the Mindful Parenting course is coming. I'm so excited. And the one really exciting thing about the Mindful Parenting course is that it is now open for lifetime enrollment. So when you join the Mindful Parenting course, you go in this spring session. You get to learn all about how to create a mindfulness practice to reduce your stress response, how to take care of your difficult feelings, how to understand why you're being triggered and what's going on with that. So we really do a lot of that deeper inner work, and then also skillful communication, what to say to help your kids listen, how to listen to help them solve their problems, how to mindfully solve problems with your kids. So we really talk about both of those things. But so you get to do the course this spring, but you also are in it for life because this work is really like deep, wonderful, lifelong work. And so you get to join the club, so to speak. And anytime I run the Mindful Parenting course, which I plan to in probably 2 times a year, or at least once a year, you're in and you get to redo the course again, come on the live coaching calls again. So super exciting. Go to mindfulparentingcourse.com. That's all. Now on to this episode. Hi, Hunter here, and welcome to Mindful Mama. I am so happy to have my guest today, Avital Schrieber. Levy? How do I say it, Avital? Levy, great, okay. Avital is a childhood designer and mindful parenting coach, and she specializes in creating simplified environments and curating playthings that are conducive to a deep, immersive, and healthy play. And she's advocates for self-directed learning approach and unschools her 2 young boys and baby girl most of the time. And you can find her on the parentingjunkie.com with weekly videos and articles. So welcome to Mindful Mama podcast, Avital.
Thanks, Hunter. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here too. This is really great. So, it's interesting because I was interested in talking to you because you come from this design background and I was an artist and we both kind of ended up in this like crazy parenting world. So I'm kind of wondering, how did you happen to end up doing the work that you're doing with the Parenting Junkie?
Yeah, I love that we have that in common. So for me, it was really one of those things, a lot of people talk about always wanting to be a mom and always knowing they want to work with children or people who come from social work or psychology or backgrounds that somehow are related to relationships and children. For me, it was the complete opposite. I didn't want to be a mom and I was not impressed with the whole parenting thing. It looked like all parents were always just so tired and so miserable and just trying to get their kids somewhere else other than with them, and I was like, why would I do that to myself? And I was in art school and I became a designer. Graphics was my kind of core focus. And then, eventually it was kind of through some kind of philosophical decision, more logical than anything else, that I decided I do want children, and I don't want to kind of die before experiencing that very essential human experience of being a parent. And once I had made that decision and became pregnant, it all shifted for me. Suddenly this became, I kind of saw it as I might have seen any of my design projects, like, oh, how can I do this cohesively, coherently? How can this make sense for me? How can this be beautiful? And, that's kind of how, parenting just got me in that place of self growth and self expression. It was much, in a way, more about me than about, being the perfect parent for my kid. It was about, for myself, trying to decipher that experience. And I just became very, very passionate about it.
That's interesting. It's so familiar, your story. And I really relate to what you're saying about this idea that parenting is about self-growth. And I think that's a really healthy approach, because really, so much depends on our own attitude, our own level of groundedness, our own level of self-care and things like that. And when that approach of like, my kids come first and that's actually not so healthy for kids anyway. So I think that's pretty cool. I like that approach that you have.
Thanks. Yeah, I totally agree. I agree that when we put kids first, it's not good for anyone. I think it's a relationship, and that means there's a give and a take, right? There has to be, or someone crashes. Exactly. And possibly both. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting, I think, that you pursued homeschooling, because that's something I looked into. So I was in graduate school studying art education, and I discovered we learned about different forms of education. And one thing I was interested in, because I had a friend who was a homeschooled kid when, like, in the 80s, when it was like really weird and unusual, right? Mm-hmm. And she was awesome, and we did all these like awesome projects in her house, and we like made candles, and we had so much fun. So I always had this great interest in it. I thought it was pretty neat. And then I learned about unschooling, which was a whole different thing, and I learned about Montessori there, which I'm really passionate about. But I remember feeling like, really learning about reading, who's the author, about learning about the conventional school system and sort of the problems with it, really kind of getting into that and being like, just feeling very, very passionate about it. Like, I'm going to do things differently when my kids, and I really entertained the idea of homeschooling. But for me, I knew it would be too much for me. It just would be too much for me personally. So I'm just interested about how you went into that choice and that decision, and how it may or may not be different from your own childhood.
Yeah, so that's a ton of, that's a lot of questions.
Here's a ton of questions.
I could talk about this for hours. But so first of all, I think I need to just say that it's not a choice that's set in stone for us by any means. It happens to be because of my husband's career. Up until now, we've moved many times over the last few years since becoming parents. So we've had this kind of, on the one hand, instability, which has been, scary and difficult and challenging. And on the other hand, a freedom and a liberation. Like, we don't have to make any long-term decisions because we're moving for his, he's a doctor, so he's done residency and fellowship, and we move around for those things. And so it's been, I've tried for the most part to take that as a liberation, to say, I can take each year as it comes, whatever suits me, where we live and how we live right now. So I just want to say, if you catch my kids in public school in 3 years, don't come saying it. I promise they'd be homeschooled forever. But having said that, I'm very passionate about deliberate education, and I don't think that necessarily means home education. So I really relate to your story of, being really passionate about Montessori and making that a big part of your child's education. I know that this is a huge privilege, right? These are first world problems. I just want to say that up front. Many children don't get the privilege of any education. So these are first world problems, and most children are absolutely fine in whatever school they go to. So I never want anyone to feel shame or pressure when it comes to these decisions. So this is just about my personal story and my personal passion. But yeah, for me, I think it's complicated. I feel like you, that I might go crazy if I stay at home with my kids all day, every day. I need to do other things. I need to take care of myself, do yoga. I need to do my work by myself in my room. I have that introverted side of me that needs alone time as well. And then on the other hand, I've been kind of cultivating a new way of looking at raising children and at education and at my life and at privacy and what that means for me, in an attempt to serve that type of alternative approach to growing up. I grew up in a very mainstream environment. I grew up in regular schools. Most of them were private, but they were, normal in the sense that there was subject matters, division by age and grading and testing, and it was all compulsory. Just a very mainstream type of school environment. And it was fine. But I spent the vast majority of my time there drawing through the classes, and I was told off a lot for that. You're dawdling, you're drawing, you're doodling, in fact.
Oh my God, I just have to interject here, Avital, because I drew through all of my classes too. I have notebooks and notebooks from like fourth grade when my teacher like rambled on and on and on about fishing for some reason. And yet, yeah, like tons of notebooks, just drawing all through class. Love that.
I know. And then you go on to become an artist, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And for me, it was like, okay, but I was already doing what I needed to be doing. I was drawing that is actually, when I look back, what serves me most in my career was those years and years of drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing. And, it took reading Alfie Kohn and Ken Robinson and Peter Gray and all these wonderful authors about, education to realize that children have their own educational path embedded in them. They know what they need to learn. They're drawn to the things that interest their unique personality. And now more than ever in the history of the earth, we can really, really, really cater for that if we wanted to. I mean, now more than ever, just because the internet offers us, endless opportunities for education. And because if you're lucky enough to be in the part of the world that allows it and that has the communities for it, you don't have to be a weirdo that's isolated at home. You can go to co-ops and meetups. I mean, we're out of the house every single day, museums, the forest, different classes that you can take. So yeah, that's kind of, I forget if there were other questions you had and I'm not answering
So
them.
that's okay. I gave you this like package of questions. Here's your question gift. There you go. Unwrap it. No, but I'm just kind of curious about, so it sounds like you had your education system, and yeah, you mentioned Alfie Kohn. That's who we read in grad school. And so when your kids were little, I mean, was homeschooling a decision you made like when you were pregnant or when you were, when they were small, or how did that decision come about? And did your husband, did he think it was a good idea? I mean, obviously, but.
Right. So we're still figuring it out. My kids are still very young. My eldest is in kindergarten. So it's not even officially considered homeschooling by many right now, but I'm less concerned with the labels, to be honest. We still haven't officially made that choice, but and it will depend greatly on what the opportunities are around us. Like if there's a great alternative school that we connect to, then and that our kids are happy in, then great. Like I'm not against school per se. And there are plenty of different democratic schools and potentially Montessori schools that I think would really jive well with us. But my kids have been to different preschools, and now they're in a program 2 days a week. So we dabble in school. This actually happened last year. I was pregnant with my third, and my boys went to just kind of a mainstream preschool in our neighborhood, and there were no other options. I was looking where we lived. There was no great alternative school, and I was looking high and low. It just wasn't happening. So everyone was like, "Oh, this is such a great school. Send your kids here." And I did. And I knew I would have to overcome a lot of my, hang-ups and fussiness. And I kind of was just telling myself, don't be so fussy. Just, that they're kids at school, they're resilient, it's fine. Don't make such a big deal out of things. But eventually the accumulative effect of all the different things that weren't right for me led me to a real feeling of unease with that decision. And I had so much pressure on me, like, you can't pull them out of school and have them home because you won't find another spot for them this late in the year, and you're going to have a baby, and how are you going to manage? You're in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 kids all day. You're going to go stir crazy, in the winter in New York, it's cold. You're going to be crazy. It's not possible. And it took a good friend, we went out for coffee and we were supposed to talk about something completely different, but I just burst out crying. And I was like, I can't with the school. I'm so unhappy. I don't feel good sending them there. And she was like, just do what feels good to you. Just follow your gut. You can do this, whatever it is, you can do it. And I was so grateful just for that, kind of obvious piece of advice, but you sometimes have to hear it from someone else. And that very day I picked them up and I was like, they're not coming back. There were a few really like unpleasant events, I have to say, in the school.
Oh no!
That I was just like, this can't be, and that was it. And then they were home, and I just, I figured it out. I got some help, and we played. I got a babysitter to come when I was doing my work. When my husband comes home, I'm like, bye, see ya. And I, go off, do my thing, and he takes over so that I get some alone time. And I also have to say that my kids go to bed early. So they're always asleep by 7, which means I really have an evening, which also really helps.
Oh, that's so essential. Oh my gosh.
So for me it is.
Well, it's interesting. I guess I think what I'm wondering about is like kind of what I think about what I really see as sort of the problem. And I guess that's kind of what I'm wondering too from you, Avital, is like, I want to talk about play and that, but I'm guessing what I'm wondering about when I'm asking about this is like your philosophy about it in some way, because I think what I see as, for me, the problem with a lot of schooling out there is that the way we teach is we teach with extrinsic, external rewards. And really, I believe that the way, and the way I teach parenting and mindful parenting, and the way I believe that kids should learn in school also, is about internal motivation, intrinsic motivation, where they do the thing, they learn the thing because they want to learn it. Like a schooling that doesn't ever like squash that love of learning, like, which I feel like is really squashed by reward and punishment. And that intrinsic desire to have a good relationship is also really, in a family can also be really squashed by reward and punishment. And I guess that's kind of where it all kind of boils down to for me, is that external versus internal motivation, where I want my kids to really be internally motivated to learn. I don't want them to be motivated through carrot and stick. So I don't know. So that's kind of personally where I personally really land on that. And so I guess I'm wondering from you, like, what is your philosophy about that? What does it boil down to for you as far as what you're really wanting and what you're really not wanting for your kids?
Yeah. So first of all, Hunter, I totally agree with you about the intrinsic motivations for everything, and 100% a school that deploys, even grades, that's already an extrinsic motivator. Yeah. And I 100% agree with you. And I think that's one major key for me. And there are a couple, at least, of others. So one big one that I think about a lot is how we define success. And I think that what happens in schools is sometimes there's a very narrow definition of success, and it's usually academic success and then financial success, which is seen as a derivative of academic success, right? You do well in school, then you do well in college, then you get a good job. Mm-hmm. Now, those are fine goals, but to me, they're a very small part of, leading a successful life. And I worry about being in an environment for so many hours a day that puts most of the emphasis on that, when, especially in the early years, but really all through life, I think that success has to be seen in a far more holistic, way. So I would like to know that the environment cares about am I developing my character? Am I being kind? Am I being responsible? Am I being empathic towards others? Am I, developing my skills in many other areas other than academic skills? Can I lead a life independently? Am I developing life skills? Am I developing relationship skills? Am I, creativity as a huge chunk of what I think is necessary to lead a meaningful and successful life. So all of those kind of parts of being a human, I think, aren't addressed by many major educational institutions. And I think it leaves us a bit amputated from major parts of our joy and happiness in the future. I know that I went through the school system and I came out not knowing how to balance a basic budget, even though I had done, higher level math. I didn't know how to balance a basic budget. I didn't know, in the life skill of going to the bank, opening an account, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't know key relationship skills. I didn't know how to be an active listener. I didn't know how to help someone when they were mourning. What do you say? I didn't know, there were just so many things I can write. I can fill whole libraries with things I didn't know that I think are much more important than some of the history and geometry that I did learn. So that's one major key for me, is how do we define success? I think that a big part of that that's related to that is competition. And I know that Montessori is all about a non-competitive environment, which is so important. But I think that competition is so deeply rooted in our culture and is such a major obstacle to what I view as, creating a successful and healthy human environment of collaboration and cooperation. And so that's something that I prefer to avoid at all costs, whether it's competitive sports, competitive schooling. I'd like my children to be an environment where the winner is someone who's stopped to help other people, not got there first,
Mm-hmm. I love the word you used. So that's... Sorry, I totally interrupted you. No, go ahead, finish.
Yeah, go for it. No,
I'm just saying I love the word you used, amputated. I think that's such I get such a vision from that, and I think that's so true. Like, it drives me crazy that we're not taught like how to listen, that's part of like our huge part of the mindful parenting course is like learning these skillful communication things that we just aren't taught, but are so essential to like living a happy, healthy life, like how to take care of your difficult feelings, like, and creativity, of course, like all those things you mentioned. I'm like nodding my head absolutely vigorously while you're talking.
Yeah. I mean, those are some schools we could get behind, right? Schools that really care about those things. So the first thing you mentioned was intrinsic motivation. The second thing that I was speaking about was success. And I think the third thing that I would mention is standardization versus diversity. Increasingly in all the books I read and the TED Talks I watch and the podcasts I listen to, we understand that human intelligence is diverse. This is something Ken Robinson really speaks to a lot. And that human experience is diverse, right? Our likes and dislikes, our preferences, our character. And there's something about the school education, rooted in an industrial era that, really highlights and sanctifies conformity and standardization. And we see that in the testing, we see that in the subject matter. It's Peter Gray claims that schools that cater to unique individual paces and interests don't cost any more money, and in fact can be much more cost effective than the public school system we currently have. So the financial, argument is off the table. And if it's off the table, then I just always come back to the question, well, why is everyone learning the exact same thing at the exact same pace? Why are all the 5-year-olds doing the same and all the 7-year-olds? I'm not saying that we don't all have to have some basic skills, right? We all need to have reading and writing, basic math skills. We all need to know some history. There are some things that I definitely want my children to learn. Don't get me wrong. It's not like, oh, I don't care if they're illiterate when they're 19. I do. I care very much. I just don't think that standardization serves anyone, really. not the strong kids who could be, moving along in that subject matter and being interested in something else, and not the weak kids who need to go slower. And I'm loath to use the term strong and weak, because everyone is strong and weak in different areas, right? I don't mean strong kids, I mean strong in that particular area. So, and then it comes back to me and you doodling in class, right? Well, is graphic design any less illustrious and important career choice than academia? Because our world cannot survive without a very wide range of skills. But, it's like we're not learning those skills. Why can't I don't know how to fix my toilet, right? I didn't learn any plumbing skills, even though they'd have served me very well in my adult life. Whereas some of the skills I learned are really, I've literally forgotten them. So that standardization piece is also important in my opinion.
Oh, I think you've laid it out really well. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm totally nodding my head vigorously. I mean, yeah, like I didn't know how to, who does their own, who does their own taxes? Like, why don't we just fill out like mock tax forms? And, it's like some things are so obvious that it drives me bananas, and then that's that whole thing. Like, we don't, all the 5-year-olds doing the same thing. Like, all kids don't learn to walk at the same time, and you're not going to help a child learn to walk through special, like classes to enhance them going, like that's something Montessori talks about, is like those learning phases. Like you have these learning periods that you're just ready for certain things. And oh my God, I could just go on and on about this.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy. Yeah, but you're right. It is also like a privileged conversation that we get to, we have these choices. Yet at the same time, I feel like the more people who make choices and show these alternatives and like strengthen the alternatives, then, here we have these models. Like here in Delaware, the school that I helped to bring about is a public school. It's a public charter Montessori school. So, and it's doing amazing. So, we're showing that these options are there. And I think the more we have the conversation about this, it opens eyes, and, it helps to maybe ever subtly change that incredibly slow moving ship of the conventional education system. Very, very incrementally, maybe. And I can kind of hear through what you're saying too, is that the idea of the creativity and play is that play, right? That idea of like learning through play, like not discounting play, but learning through play, and how important free play is. And I'd love to talk to you about that, because I really made it a point to have my children have lots of time for free play, even though there are many times where, there were times where they'd say, I just want to, I don't know, do this, or I'm bored. And I'd be like, something to do is right around the corner, honey. Like you can, and you wouldn't believe it. Like, so your kids are younger now, but like my girls are 9 and 6. And the creative things they do, like I have never met such creative human beings in my life. Like they're amazing. Like yesterday they built this enormous teepee in the backyard with bamboo in our backyard. And they sawed off the edges of the bit, and everything. I mean, it's unbelievable. Wow. So tell me about, tell the listener about the importance of free play and how and why is it challenged right now? Why do we even have to defend it?
Yeah. Wow. So this is a topic I'm super passionate about, and I 100% agree with you. Children are incredibly creative. Picasso said that every child is an artist. And it's actually, I'm not going to quote each and every piece of research, but almost everything here has been empirically researched at how, going through the school system, children will start off with a certain level of creativity. So when they're given like sentences to complete or drawings to guess what a drawing might be, they have a very wide and open creative range of ideas. And then it's slowly knocked out of them as they go through the system, learning that there's only one right answer, and learning that the stakes are very high if you get the answer wrong. So you shouldn't try a new approach or a different idea, because your teacher will not approve of that, or it won't be the correct answer on the test. So we see that those systems actually knock creativity out of children. But coming back to play, I think play is so deeply misunderstood. I definitely misunderstood it. We have this, even just our language around play separates play from learning, and separates play from work. And I think that meaningful work and meaningful learning don't happen for children or for adults without play. To me, play is that state of flow. It's a state of creativity where we're allowed to apply our imaginations and what's in our inner worlds in the outer world. We're allowed to bring that forth. So things that we might, conjure up in our mind's eye, we bring to fruition. And you see that in creative arts, obviously, right? Someone coming up with a dance or with a movie or with a piece of art. But children are doing that all the time, right? They're telling narratives, they're building worlds, they're creating entire universes through play, whether it's dramatic play, dressing up and acting out, or it's constructive play, they're building something out of Lego or out of blocks, whatever, or, art, sensory exploration, whatever it is, they're exploring, they're investigating, they're practicing science, they're practicing logic, they're practicing literature in the sense that they're creating narratives and telling stories. So all of that is happening in a natural way through play. And unfortunately, because of the standardization movement and because of many different things that have led us to view learning as something that you can and should quantify and measure, we've eclipsed this vital, perhaps the only true way that people learn, through self-motivated play. You can teach a child something, you can force them to do well on a test, but you can't force them to internalize it. You can't force them to make it their own, and to know it. That they can forget it the next day. But if a child is initiating it themselves, or an adult, I think all of this applies to our own work as well. If the exploration is motivated intrinsically and is explored freely without the punishment and reward, without the expectation of someone else, then it's truly theirs. They own it, and we tend to underestimate children. We tend to underestimate just how far and how incredibly they can create and they can learn. So I think that when we actually take off, I call it taking off the leash, like when you're walking a dog and you hold the leash, he's pulling you, you're pulling him, he stops, you're at the wrong pace, you're not going at the right. When you take off the leash, suddenly you guys can get into a dance, right? The dog goes forward at his own pace, then he stops, and you can carry on at your pace, and you kind of meet and separate in this dance. And I think that's what happens when we allow children to play. They go off into their own worlds, they express their own needs, and they're so accurate. They are so accurate with their play. They will play the exact things that they need to learn and that they need to work on, right? Like they've had some kind of trauma or some kind of concern or some kind of jealousy, or they're struggling with a certain area, or they're trying to master a concept. And it's exactly as you said, when babies start to learn to walk. I mean, show me the healthy, normal baby who's reaching that stage of being interested to walk, who isn't practicing, who isn't getting up and trying again, who isn't cruising, who isn't testing themselves on the carpet, on the floor, on the steps, on the outside gravel, right? They are thirsty and more motivated than anyone I've ever seen to master that skill in their own time, at their own pace, when they're ready. And I think that's true of every single skill, if the environment supports it. that will happen, but it has to happen through play, in my opinion.
Yeah, I absolutely see that. I mean, my daughter Sora, she could crawl, she could climb before she could walk, actually. Like she actually climbed up the ladder at the playground before she could walk to the ladder. And, it was like pretty impressive. And you kind of see this sort of playing out through her life. But I think it's interesting. One thing that makes me thinking about the importance of this and sort of why we have trouble with this is I think there's a lot of maybe fear and anxiety in parents and in maybe in people who are listening. Like, I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety about being able to trust that, being able to trust that our children are gonna do the right things to get what they need to do, to get what they learn. Like, I think there's a lot of there's a lot of distrust that everything will be okay, and a lot of like inner anxiety that maybe is provoked by culture, by upbringing and things like that, that if we are not telling them what to do, that how can we trust our kids in that way? Do you see that?
Oh, for sure. And that comes up in me often, like I feel this pressure, even though I'm so against early academic pressure and I'm so against teaching kids to read before they're ready and all of that stuff. I feel this kind of pressure or these eyes on me, oh, you're first of all, I speak publicly about parenting and I'm, doing this kind of mishmash of unschooling and alternative schools. And I kind of feel this need to prove, oh, look, my child can read, even though he's only 5. And I don't think there's any necessary reason to teach kids to read that early. But anyway, I'm just saying I totally experienced that fear. And I think it comes down to a very controlling message that we all get, control your children. I've been told that explicitly, control your children, as if that was possible or desirable, and Dr. Shefali Tabari talks a lot about control and about how it's such a myth. It's a complete myth to even think that we have control over anything other than our own minds. And even that we don't always have control over. So I think, I'm on a mission to dispel that fear and that guilt. Dr. Carla Nornberg, who I know you're close with, talks about that myth that what we do as parents is going to determine how our children come out, as if they're some project of ours. And Alison Gopnik, in her book The Gardener and the Carpenter, also the Carpenter and the Gardener, maybe it is, also talks about it beautifully, about how parenting has only recently become a verb. It used to be a noun, to be a parent, like to be a friend and to be a wife and to be a husband. You're not wifing, right? You're just a wife. And she talks about just be a parent. Don't parent actively, just be a parent. And I love that because it reminds me that I'm not supposed to shape them. I'm not supposed to mold them. They are who they are. The only thing I have control over is me and maybe our environment. I can control a little bit. I can make those choices, but I don't need to shape my child. And that element that you said about trust, that's just so huge. That's a mantra of mine that I keep having to bring myself back to. Just trust, and trust as a way of allowing things to actually develop. One of the things that I learned from Rye, from Janet Lansbury and Rye, was not to push babies to walk or sit up before they're ready, right? Not to prop them up, not to hold their hands and make them walk unless they were initiating that themselves. And I think that just applies to everything. We can inspire, we can model, we can, spark play, I call it, like prompt. We can, prompt by creating an environment that induces a certain type of behavior or a certain type of play. But, we're not carpenters. We're not making a piece of furniture. We're more like gardeners. That's what Alison Gopnik teaches. You tend to the soil, tend to the nutrients, make sure there's water, make sure there's sun, and then let the plant grow.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I absolutely agree. I mean, and back to what Shafali Sabari said, I think saw her speak and she said, we need to love our children, but care about them less. I thought that's so brilliant,
love them
like,
a bit less, right? Yeah.
like love them a bit less, like, which is just a way of jolting us out of this mode of like, oh, we have to just be in there, like doing everything and controlling everything. And, no, we're in a relationship with these people, where they are their own people too. And it's funny because I often think, like, when my oldest daughter was born, I remember having this experience of like, holy shit. Like, there were 4 people in this room and now there are 5 whole people in this room. Like, there is a whole other person here. Like, she is just has her whole own being, and it was just blew my mind, right? And at first I was like, oh, thank God it's over. And then yes, there's this other person here. But it's interesting because I think over time, as she became a toddler, like, some of that feeling wore off, where I got sucked into the culture of like, my child should be like this and should be like that, and that fear and anxiety. And I didn't even see her as this whole other person. And I think a lot of the way sometimes we approach our children is just not even seeing them as whole people yet. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very hard because we are conditioned to believe that they're a reflection of us, and that their behavior, is a reflection of our parenting, and that their achievements, we live vicariously through so many things about our children, their appearance, their achievements, their choices, their behaviors. And it's almost impossible to divorce from that. I think it's so deeply culturally rooted, in that, that we can somehow be proud of them or ashamed of them, embarrassed by them, all of these things, because they are ours, right? All this language is all the language of ownership.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's our shit.
Which,
that's
okay,
our stuff.
That's fine, right. That's part of it, but we've got to, it's so hard. It is so hard. I know. I get deeply triggered by so many things that my son might do, because I feel like it reflects badly on me, or this isn't how I envisioned him to be. But that's my work. That is my work of letting go.
Yeah. So how can we? I wanted to talk to you about play. I know I get so passionate about all these things, but how can we? What are some things we can do? You especially have young kids. How can we make the environment more conducive to giving kids that time for unstructured play? And how can we make their interior environment, like their home environment, more conducive for that?
Yeah. Okay. So this is something that I talk about extensively, but I'll just bring a few ideas here because it's a very deep topic. So first of all, I think the number one thing to do is to simplify the environment. Culturally, we're told more is more, that your child needs this toy or that toy to learn, to become the next Einstein. They'll love it. It will keep them busy. We're promised all these different promises. I just recommend that we all exercise extreme suspicion when it comes to purchasing toys, and that we remember that throughout history, kids have maybe had, 1 or 2 toys, or just nature, sticks, stones, pebbles, water to play with. And in many parts of the world, that's still the case. And it actually serves them better than more toys. So simplifying and less is more when it comes to toys, I think is a very important one. Primarily because overstimulation is worse than understimulation, in my opinion. When we you can imagine, I like to use the analogy of arriving to work, and you come to your desk and suddenly you have 7 computers and 6 printers and 4 phones and 3 microphones, and you have all this gear cluttering up your desk, and now you're supposed to work.
I love that.
You can't focus. You're like, I just got so much stuff. I don't even know how to use these. I don't know how to start. Right. And I just think for kids, give them a clear desk, let them do the work. Don't worry so much about the tools. So that's the first. And then when you're looking at toys, I would say it's always better to err on the side of simple and open-ended, because we really want to activate our children's imagination and not the toy company's imagination. So, every single movie that comes out by Disney or Pixar or Nickelodeon has a bazillion different gadgets and toys and characters and books and t-shirts and cups and plastered all over it. So we've got to just be mindful of the advertising power that's going into our playrooms. And then many of the toys promise to do things for our children. This will fly and you press buttons and then it sings and then it dances and it flashes lights. And it's all fun and games, but really we want our children to be the ones imagining. And the way that they do that best is with, simple set of blocks, simple set of Lego, simple characters, right? We just need to remember that the objects and items in our home have an energetic value. And I don't mean that in the spiritual sense, although that too. I mean that literally we are affected by their form. They are instructions in a way. Okay, so think of toys as instructions for play. If you give your children, TV show toys, that's the type of play you can imagine. They will, sink into. And if you give your children toys that play for them, then they are learning they don't need to play. They just need to be passively entertained. So that's the second thing, is really going for open-ended materials. I would say that art supplies are more important than toys, because children make their own toys. Children make their own, drawings and puppets and characters. If you give them clay, if you give them Play-Doh, it's so much more interesting than something that a company has pre-designed for them. And then thirdly, I would just notice about your own role in play. I think that another message that we get is that we need to talk to babies, we need to entertain them, we need to develop them. If they're not reaching the rattle, we should reach the rattle for them and rattle it in their face and teach them and show them. Well, real research by Alison Gopnik shows that kids actually learn much better and much more when they're allowed to explore things on their own. So just an anecdote from her research, which is fascinating. When an adult shows a kid a toy with a bunch of different levers and buttons and says, this is how the toy works, and presses the button for them, then the kid is likely to repeat that action. But when she just kind of uses that in front of the child, and the child witnesses her using the toy, even if she only uses it in one way, but she wasn't instructive in how to use it, then the kid is going to explore all the other ways of using that toy as well. So we have to be very, very careful, because we can actually teach children out of play. Our instructions can actually inhibit and infringe on their curiosity and their self-motivation. So I like to think of my role as a parent as an assistant to the director. So my children are the directors of the show. I do not get involved in their play unless absolutely necessary. And what I mean by necessary is they can't open the bag, or they can't, they need technical help reaching a toy or setting something up. Beyond that, I really see myself as a behind the scenes assistant, just there to minimalistically support their play, and not direct it, not get in the driver's seat.
That is great. Thank you so much for that, Avital. And I absolutely recommend all of those things. That's wonderful, and that's a lot of what we did when my girls were little. And we're going to be we have some modules in the mindful parenting course about simplifying and things like that. And now we're going to have some nice bonuses from Avital about play too in the mindful parenting course. So I'm so thrilled about that. And those, and I can tell you, as I'm now the parent of a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, that it's interesting. Like at first, when you simplify and you think, oh my God, they're going to freak out. And every time I've simplified my kids' stuff, they've been like, thank you. My room is decluttered. It's so nice. I really love it. Like they're so thrilled. And they do create their own stuff. Like, it's really, like, I was like, what, these silk scarves in the Naturals catalog, like, whatever, And then we made our own silk scarves. And I have to say, silk scarves are like scarves in general, like just a bucket of scarves is like an awesome it's just so awesome. I mean, every parent needs a bucket of scarves because they become everything. It's wonderful to watch. I just love watching that. Yeah.
Amazing. I so agree.
Awesome. Well, so thank you so much, Avital, for coming on the podcast. I love talking to you. Obviously, we have a lot in common, and I want to direct people over to your videos, your YouTube channel. So where can people find you?
At theparentingjunkie.com.
Awesome. And like I said, Avital will have some work in the Mindful Parenting course, so you can look forward to that as well. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm super excited for that.
Yay!
Thank you, Hunter. This was so much fun. It's so great talking to you, and I can't wait to have you on the Parenting Junkie.
Woohoo! I'm looking forward to it. All right. Thank you so much for listening to the Mindful Mama podcast. I loved talking to Avital. I could have talked to her for hours about this stuff. She is going to be offering a bonus for the Mindful Parenting course that you can look forward to just as an extra because we love you. So go to mindfulparentingcourse.com to sign up for the waiting list if you're listening to this while it's coming out. Otherwise, we are going to be enrolling before March 2nd, so get over there. If you have any questions about the podcast, please email me at hunter@hunteryoga.com and go over to, of course, the events page. We'll be doing the Mindful Mother's Day retreat in May. Say that 5 times fast. And finally, a big thank you to you for listening, and a big thank you to William Fields for the music. So sending you lots of love, my friend. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week. Namaste.